Sunday morning.
So 27 lines.
Terrified
Thank you.
of what I was gonna have to go do. And stand in front of a group of people and speak. Yeah, he goes to the, if you know.
I've done that. It's just fine. As soon as I start, those bugs noise. I do it enough. I'm out pretty much one week a month during the year training.
Are you? Well, I like your outlook.
Well, thank you. Rick Grace, bless his heart, I made the mistake of he came to preach at our church and I let him stay at our house. And he said, you know, that might be good to do for the churches in DHF. So would you do that? And I went, nah, we'll talk about it. So January, I hear from him, and he said, well, plans are all made, you're on the schedule. And I went, wait. We hadn't talked about this yet, had we? No, you're on the schedule. All right.
He told me he's gonna be here for your next session on.
I'm anticipating he will not let me, cut me any slack at all, so. Since you guys are here early, I kind of let it slip. I enjoy this, and if we're not having fun, we shouldn't be here. So, hold me accountable. If I say something and you don't feel it's right, throw a flag. If I can't justify it, I shouldn't say it.
Get ready to throw.
We got it. That's great.
I think you're good whenever.
Oh, we are on time, aren't we? So I'm looking at the clock in the back, which shows me I got 20 minutes.
It's probably
to
very
start.
wrong.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name's Steve Vandermolen. I'm here by the good graces of Rick Grace. We talked about church security when he came up and visited us last September, and he asked that I do this presentation for. It's primarily for small churches. Why do I worry more about small churches than large churches? Large churches have money. They can hire people, they can do things. Small churches are going to pretty much do it on their own. So what we're going to go through is kind of what I found out after 20 years in the military and 30 years working for a major petrochemical company in the security and emergency response field. I developed an interest. I went through the postal shootings in the late 80s. I went through workplace violence in the early 90s, wrote a workplace violence program for a company. I went through school shootings and got certified as a school guardian trainer in Texas, and I teach school safety officers. And now we fixed the post office and they moved to workplace. We fixed the workplace and they moved to schools. We are fixing the schools, so what's the next soft target? Churches. So that's why we're here. How many? Who speaks Spanish in here?
Very little.
Oh, come on.
Very little.
What's the Spanish word for safety? Seguridad. What's the Spanish word for security? Seguridad. There's one word. That's neat. I like that. Where let's treat those interchangeably. If I say safety, it means the same thing as me saying security. As a matter of fact, in Texas, there's a reason that we moved to saying safety, because if you start saying security, you get into the realm of you may need to be licensed before you can protect your church. So we're moving everything now more and more toward safety. I'd always attended churches. I'd always considered security programs. I attended large churches, but when I got into a small church when we moved up to Crockett, Texas, there were no security programs. As a matter of fact, there were only maybe one church in the whole town that had a security program. And then Sutherland Springs happened. Sutherland Springs, a small church in the town of Sutherland Springs, south of San Antonio. And it gentleman who had checked the church out the weekend before when they had a carnival outside fair, thought that he could, his in-laws and his former wife would be in the church that Sunday morning. And they were going through a very contentious divorce, and he showed up and was going to kill his in-laws and his wife. They weren't there. He ended up killing 26 people, 26 people, and wounding 21. The church was building of lambs led to the slaughter. There was nobody in there that defended themselves. He went outside, took off running down the street, and a neighbor saw him and took off after him and ended up killing him about a mile down the road. But it was that outsider that did it. Since then, there have been other church shootings. When I started looking into it, I was not confident in how churches were building a safety security program to protect themselves. The most frequent response I got when I asked a church, what are you doing for safety or for security, was Bubba's got a gun and he's sitting by the back door. And when somebody comes in, he'll shoot him. That's not a plan. That's an action, and it's not a very well thought out action. Having come out of writing response plans and writing prevention plans, I said, why don't we back up a little bit and start at the beginning? Let's figure out what we need to protect first. Then, once we know what we've got to protect and what our risks are, let's take a risk-based approach to this whole thing. So that's kind of how I got here. This morning I had some butterflies when I got up and I went to do my morning devotions. And this is what turned up. Number one on my devotions this morning was Ezekiel 33:1 and following. Son of man, speak to the sons of your people and say to them, if I bring a sword upon the land, and the people of the land take one man from among them and make him a watchman, and he sees the sword coming upon the land and blows the trumpet and warns the people, then he who hears the sound of the trumpet and does not take warning, and the sword comes and takes him away, his blood will be on his own head. But if the watchman sees the sword coming and does not blow the trumpet, and the people are not warned, and the sword comes and takes the person, he will be taken away in his own iniquity, but the blood I will require from the watchman's hand. So, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we pray that this morning will be honoring to you. We pray that you will guide my words, that we will give information that is honoring you and that helps churches protect their congregations. Father, I give this entire presentation to you. I give all the people here to you, and I ask that you'll watch over us through it. In Jesus' name, amen. So, what are we doing? We're going to start with just an introduction, 1 Timothy 1:7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and discipline. We're going to talk about fear a lot, because a lot of our congregations have fear, and they are afraid of this. And we, as the people that are going to protect them, need to do things. Churches are soft targets. I had an argument with one of our facilities people one morning. He says, every time I show up at church, you've got the door open and you're letting all the heat out, or all the cold in. And I said, I can't imagine a church on a Sunday morning with a closed door. And we've agreed to disagree, but I'm head of the security program, so he's got to do what I say. There are more and more incidents happening, and over the last 6 months to a year, it's been weird. They're not following the patterns. Before, you could almost assure that it was somebody who was affiliated with the church. There was either a divorce going on, there was a child custody battle going on, the person had mental problems, and was coming back to the church to settle some scores, or the church had been supporting, but all of a sudden there's these outside attacks. And the LDSs have taken a hit twice now. and they had, and then there was a synagogue that had a guy drive through the front door. So there's auto attacks now, and this church has done a good job of putting bollards out front of the glass doors so people can't drive in. I got to talk to the security people at this church this morning, and they've got a pretty good, robust program here. Proper planning, so incidents are increasing in frequency and variety, and safety programs are supporting ministry, and they're supposed to be minimizing fear. How do we minimize fear? Gavin de Becker, in his book Fearless, said that the better prepared you are, the less fear you have to deal with. So if you are prepared to deal with it, your congregation is prepared to deal with it, know that you're taking care of them. Now you've got a way that the congregation can come into church on Sunday morning, sit there and believe that someone is there to protect them. That's why it's, we want to support that fear. 2017 to 2021, there were one incident in Sutherland Springs and nothing through the COVID period. And then they picked up in 2022 through 2020 through today. Just looking, there have been maybe 15 or 20 of them that have happened. Not all of them fatal. And also what we're seeing more, and I'm crediting this with the awareness that's going on about this, more and more of them are being short-circuited by well-trained church security teams and just having a person there. So it happened in the post office, it happened in workplace violence, it happened in the schools. We're seeing the same thing happening now. We're not soft targets anymore. We are protecting ourselves, and we're doing things to do. Medical, but it's bigger than just the shooting. That's the littlest piece of this thing. What's the likelihood of any one of the 400,000 churches in this country being attacked on a Sunday morning? Pretty low. What are the consequences? Pretty high. So the risk is up, but the likelihood is low. What's the greatest likelihood on a Sunday morning in any church? Heart attack, somebody going out, epic insulin shock, any one of things. Should we spend as much time on medical preparedness as we should on shooting somebody?
Yes.
So the security program is not just, safety security program is not just who's going to shoot the bad guy. It's better off, let's do everything we can to prepare the congregation, protect the congregation, and then let's do everything we can not to ever let that guy get into the church. Do everything we can to prevent it from ever happening. Severe weather. Boy, did you guys get it Monday morning or Monday night. I wasn't here. I was down saying, I wonder if my flight's going to go tomorrow morning. But you guys got a prime example of severe weather on Monday evening here. What if it had been on Sunday morning and you were in church and there was a tornado sighted? Do you have a shelter-in-place plan for severe weather? You should. I mean, that's part of this overall plan we're talking about getting done. And you ought to be able to know how to do it. And weather is becoming more. Child safety issues, we're going to talk about them in a little while when we get into this thing. It's a big deal. We'll just say that for now, and it's getting worse. Domestic spillover, there needs to be a linkage between counselors and the security team. If we are counseling somebody that's in crisis, the safety security team ought to know that. Mental health crisis, I've got a good example for that when we get to it. Theft and vandalism. Churches are getting vandalized. Thefts happen, internal and external. Armed intruders, rare, but they are high impact. So what's our goal? We want to protect people so so ministry can continue. The entire safety/security program should be elevated to a ministry level. It needs that kind of support, it needs that kind of buy-in, and it needs that kind of confidence from the congregation that the leadership is involved in it, that it is endorsed by them, and that it's not just a couple of people out doing it on their own, that it is truly a ministry of the church that's protecting the other ministries from these things that can happen. Reduce preventable harm from any risk. Support pastors, volunteers, and congregants, and build confidence, not fear. And again, the more prepared you are, the less fear you have. Or the easier it is to deal with the fear. Today, the key things I want to focus on are, number one, it's prevention over response. How many fire extinguishers in this building? Anybody? Let's say there's 30. Okay, is that a fair number? Do we want to start a fire so we can see if the fire extinguishers work? Some of us might. But most of us would like to not ever have a fire, so we never had to learn. If you grab a fire extinguisher and you go to a fire, can you get burned? Can you get killed?
Yes.
I don't want to ever have to use a fire extinguisher. I would rather do fire prevention. And that's why I don't want to respond to stuff. I want to proactively set it up so we don't have to deal with it. Or we've dealt with it beforehand. Key takeaway, lock your doors during the service. I'm not an attorney. I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express one night. But if you lock your doors, as long as people can still get out of the church, you're not going to be in trouble. And that bad guy's going to come in, pull on the door. And only one case so far in Minneapolis, somebody shot through the windows into the church, but that was a school church. Layered security. Where's your security program start? At the street? At the street. Everything starts at the street and works to the pulpit. So when we're doing our risk assessments, we'll talk about those. What I like in our church about the security team is they are a team. We train together, we work together, we go to lunch together, we spend time together, we get to know each other, we practice together. We do drills together. We tabletop scenarios together. But we're all working together. We all have our assigned positions, and we all know everybody else's job. So if somebody is not there, we just rotate into new positions. I am not, like I said, I am not an attorney. Any program that you develop, we have a legal duty to protect anyone we invite onto our property. That's case law. Anything beyond that, I'm going to say, as you write your program and as you implement your program, make sure you talk to an attorney because there are some tricks. Also, make sure you talk to your insurance agent. There are some Texas companies that say, yeah, we don't care if there are. There are some Texas companies out of the East Coast that say under no circumstances, no how, nowhere will you ever bring a gun in one of our churches if we're insuring it. So I've seen both. Before we talk about what we're going to do, we need to understand what we're protecting. And that's where we need to assess risk. Fruit sees danger, it takes refuge, the simple keeps going and suffers for it. You got to look at your church and see what's there and what you need to take care of. Structured process to identify what can go wrong, the likelihood of that incident happening. What do you think is going to rise to the top? Medical. The impact if it happens, and what existing programs do you have in place to deal with that? Have you got an AED? Do you do potlucks on the church, in the church buildings? Do you have a life vac? Pretty cool, huh? I thought of something. I gave you a tip already. Do you have a life vac in the kitchen? Do you have another life vac where the kids are, if they eat snacks and stuff in the Sunday schools? Everybody knows what a life vac is, right? Looks like a plunger. Somebody falls on the ground and they're choking. I've seen those things work, man. They will, your toes will curl when they use this thing. You put a mask over them, you attach it to it, you push down, and pull up. And it will dislodge anything. The guy's got like 12,000 saves now, some ridiculous number.
What'd you call that again?
It's a life vac.
L-I-F-E?
L-I-F-E-V-A-C.
Okay.
About $70 on Amazon for 2 masks, kids mask and an adult's mask. Needed improvements. I just gave you a needed improvement for your. So what can we do? What do we have in place that already deals with medical? And what do we need to deal with those issues? Let's take medical, for example. Somebody in the church goes down, boom, in the middle of the church, in the aisle, and they need an AED. What's the first thing you're going to have to do?
Get space.
Call 911.
You're going to have to cut their clothes off them.
Oh.
You're going to have to undress them. Should you have an evacuation plan written into that that says the rest of your security team gets everybody out and takes them over to the fellowship hall?
Yes.
Just a thought. I mean, that's what I would do, but I don't know. 4 categories of church risk: people risk, property risk, operational risks, and environmental risks. We're going to go through these one at a time and kind of work through them. People risk, medical emergencies. They are a lot more complex than we got a nurse that works that goes to the church and she can come up and take care of it. It really is not going to work that way. Another tip. Who's going to make the 911 call? Who in your church is going to make the 911 call? In our church, it's going to be the sound room, because they're always there, they're always staffed, and they got a phone up there. They also have 2 cell phones up there. But when you do that, put a script up there. It's got the address, the name of the church, address of the church, what's going on, what to say, and then stay on the line with them. When people are under stress, they will not do what you expect them to do. I don't care how much you practiced it, people will still surprise you. They will find amazing ways to surprise you when the problem happens. You will. I saw a real good planner one time, a guy I respected a lot and wrote a lot of plans with me. When the real thing came, I was looking for him, he was under the desk. He planned great, he just didn't like the pressure of having to deal with it, and you never know. People are our biggest assets. What risk do they face? But there's another piece of this. What risks do the people in that church present to others? Our pastor one time got a phone, he does a lot of work for child services. He got a phone call from a person who said, I would really like to get registered with the Department of Children's Affairs in Texas. And since you're the state chair for it right now, what do I need to do to sign up? And he said, tell me about yourself. And the guy went through these stories, and he finally goes, I have to tell you in the spirit of full transparency, I am an MAP, but I don't act out on my urges. So him being a little naive, types in MAP because he was sitting at his computer. It says minor attractive person. And he said, I don't think you're going to fit into what we need. The fact is, you think he quit? You think he's not going to try someplace else to do the same thing? So, behavioral concerns, domestic disputes, they are a big deal. If you have a contentious relationship in that church, an awful lot of those threatening behaviors come from people who are going through domestic problems. Kidnapped kids because of custody battles. Stalking because of the guy trying to find where his wife is. And it's mostly the guy, but if a couple is splitting up and they have been active in church, where does the guy know he can find his wife and kids on a Sunday morning?
Church.
you ought to know about that if the church leadership has got somebody in counseling and they feel that's an issue. There ought to be that line of communication. Mental health issues. I'm sorry? Oh. We had a guy that was known in the community as being a methamphetamine user. And he started coming to church. And we knew he was there. And he thought church was a communications opportunity, not just the sermon was something that you sat and listened to. He thought it was an interrogatory. And that's okay. I didn't have an issue with that. But I did sit next to him every time he came to church. And if he started to get out of hand, I had the two biggest guys in the security team sitting in a pew right behind me. And we would have very gently and graciously and lovingly to the door of the church. Uninvited guests. That just took on a whole new meaning. What happened in Minneapolis about a month ago? They got about 30 uninvited guests who were there for one purpose and one purpose only, which is to A, disrupt the service, and B, get somebody to hit them. Nobody did. They called the police. I know how it works in Texas. I'm not going to pretend to know how it works in every other state here that's represented here. But generally, trespassing law says if you tell them to leave, there is an obligation for them to leave. If they don't leave, you now have a legal violation that you can now call law enforcement to come in and say, they came in, they're disrupting, and they didn't leave, so I want to trespass them. Would you please remove them from the property? That didn't work in Minneapolis because the police were told not to go and do anything. But generally in a small town, in a smaller church, you're not going to have that problem. So that's people risks. Let's talk a little bit about property risks. Theft.
But let me mention,
Please.
we, in our church, we're a small town, we have a judge that goes to our church, and we have an assistant prosecuting attorney that goes to our church.
Fantastic.
That's extra.
You got them trespassed before you even tell them. So that's an asset that you need to write right into your program. So.
It seems like it's a risk that we're a target.
Well, of course you're a target.
Yeah.
Our pastor's a target. The things he put me through. He went and testified before the Senate on using LGBTQ stuff into infants and small children that are pulled into the system. And the state was considering what they were going to do on that legally. And he sat down, he was asked to testify, and he sat down in front of the committee. And they said, do you have any questions? He says, yeah, I have one question. Is the age of consent in Texas still 17? And the chairman of the committee goes, yes. And he says, then why are we sitting here having this conversation? Well, there are a whole bunch of people protesting outside. And this was before we had a real good program set up. And he comes to me the next Sunday morning and he goes, that person sitting in the back row was one of the demonstrators on Good Friday when it was. So he gives me some headaches sometimes, but he's a good guy. Theft, internal and external. You should have controls in place. I think we should be required to have them anyway, but you should have controls in place in theft. Mostly, the biggest risk we got is cash. But theft of data, theft of basically any internal and external theft. I was working, after I retired, I worked as a private investigator and bodyguard for 3 years. And I was in the office one morning and my boss got a phone call from a large church in Houston. I will not mention any names. And they said, can you send somebody down here to help us do an investigation? He said, well, what's up? Well, we lost $346,000 in yesterday's receipts, cash. And he said, did you call the police? And they said, no, we really don't want it into the news. And he was wise enough to say, nah, I don't think so. I don't think so. Interestingly, just as an aside, not that it's related in any way, that same church was undergoing a remodeling about almost 12 years later, and they found $340,000 hidden in the wall of a restroom. Now, I'm not saying that it was related, but it's kind of interesting that it happened. So, theft it can be an issue. Vandalism. Churches are getting vandalized more and more. Not so much in small towns, but it's still something. How do you minimize vandalism? Lighting, security cameras. Cameras are just evidence, they're not prevention. Fire hazards, look around the place, find fire hazards. Stairs, any child play areas, anything that can create a liability from a property. Operational, protecting children. The Methodist Church, I know, has a formal nationwide child protection program that every local church has to follow. And it's pretty good if you can get a copy of it, if you don't have one of your own. Methodist, the United Methodist Church.
Called Safe Sanctuary.
It is.
Which one was it?
Safe Sanctuary.
Thank you. And it's a good program. Cameras in Sunday schools. This church has got cameras in all of their Sunday school classes. 2 teachers in every class. You can do it. I mean, there are things that if you don't have Sunday school, you don't worry about it until your Sunday school starts building. But if you do, you do it. Financial accountability, technology. We are getting more and more stuff stored online that we wouldn't want somebody outside of the church to get access to. So you ought to have a good IT security survey. Volunteer screening. Boy, is that a big deal.
You wanna know who you're putting in that.
You want to know who's coming into church, who's going to be volunteering to work. Background checks. You can subscribe to services that will allow you to do X number of background checks for X number of dollars. In Texas, if you have a license to carry, you get a background check every 4 years. And if something happens that causes you to not be eligible to hold that, they will take it from you. The police will come and take it from you. And so you can use, in that case, we can use a active, valid license to carry that we can call the state of Texas and verify it's valid, and as long as it's valid and good, that's at least a good criminal. So a good criminal check. Event security. If you're having something going on in the church, I hate to tell this story, but I gotta tell it. We were doing a wedding one time, and I had been in the church when the wedding was being set up, but our pastor said, no, it's just a young couple, not a big wedding, shouldn't be any issues, go ahead and go home. So I went home, and I got a phone call about 3 hours later that said, boy, I wish you'd stayed. The groom was helping set up the church, and he had a Glock 19 stuck in his waistband. And the pastor says, I'm not going to do this ceremony until you lock that in your truck. The kid went out and locked it in his truck, comes back in. Pastor, what were you doing? What were you thinking? He says, well, when you were going to say, if anybody in this church has cause for them not to be joined in holy matrimony, I was going to take it out and point it at whoever said anything, or threaten the church and say, don't anybody say a word. I would have been sitting on the aisle halfway back, which is where he would have been pointing the gun. And I would have been armed. What's the first thing he would have done if I said drop the gun? He would have pointed it at me, because I was the one that talked to him. I could have shot that kid. It was God's grace that caused me to leave before that wedding started. But you never know what's gonna happen. We've had funerals where people have had fights, or Uncle Bubba got so drunk that they had to throw him out of the church. So we now have a policy in the church that every event, we're gonna have at least one security person there to control over those events. Environmental risks, severe weather, you gotta have a shelter-in-place plan. You ought to know where your safe shelters are in your church. We've got 2 large restrooms that are all enclosed in the center of the church. We can get the entire congregation into those 2 restrooms. We hope they don't use the facilities, but we can get them in there. Power outages, flooding. You had all of that Monday night here. There are interesting challenges for rural churches. What's the biggest interesting challenge for rural churches?
Police response.
Response time is, police, ambulance, whatever, is gonna be half an hour, 40 minutes. That's tough. Take that into account when you're building your plans. Highways and rail lines, why is that important?
Transit's wandering.
Part of it. Anybody have a train go by their church? Anybody ever heard of a train derailing?
No.
Anybody ever have a highway where hazmat trucks go by your church? That may be a shelter in place, maybe an evacuation, but it's something you need. It's another one of those things that need to be considered when you're talking about environmental. So once you go through that assessment and you decide what your risks are, now what we want to do is just walk the entire property. Take a group and do it during the day once, and do it at night once. And look at the church, walk through the church, look for stuff that you've missed. Take a good quality, slow walk through the church and look at what's the church look like from the outside? Does anything look inviting? Can you see computers through the windows? Those kinds of things. Sanctuary exits, children's access, all of that. Prioritize risks in a simple matrix. You've got that in your slides, your handout. So the next section is prevention over response. We really don't want to respond, we want to prevent. Most incidents are preventable. Response is always slower. Anybody ever heard of the quarter-second rule? You live your life in quarter-second increments, and action always beats reaction every time. So if I'm planning on response, I am waiting for the incident to happen and then starting my response. If I'm using a prepared approach, a prevention approach, I don't have to wait for the incident to happen. I can look for triggers that cause me to think an incident could happen and start taking action early. Prevention reduces liability, and it builds confidence and calm within the congregation if they know that you're doing things to prevent things to happening. Then that calmness is there. So the 5 sections of awareness, we'll go through those as well one at a time. Early warning signs, if you see something, say something, and normalize safety without creating fear. That's cultural awareness. Policies and procedures, each one of these things, your medical, every one of these things need a written procedure that people can learn and follow. Yeah, it's a pain to write them and they're a pain to keep updated, but if you have them and you practice them and you demonstrate that they work, it gives people confidence in their response. Evacuation plans, access rules, incident reporting. People in training, greeters. Train your greeters to see what's going on. West Freeway Church of Christ, the guy that killed 2 people in that church before he was killed was wearing a wig, a beard, a heavy overcoat in warm weather, and had a shotgun under his coat. they knew him. They recognized him and said, we'll just keep an eye on him. The hairs stand up on the back of your neck, listen to that. Ushers, they can help deal with evacuation and accountability, medical volunteers, and safety team de-escalation response. Clint Smith, one of my favorite instructors for self-defense, says in your life you're probably going to talk to a lot more people than you shoot, so you ought to be a better talker than shooter. So that's kind of that de-escalation training. Learn to talk to them. Physical security, controlled entry points, real-time camera monitoring. This church has shut off a bunch of entry points. They've now congregated things down to one door, which is absolutely perfect. Real-time camera monitoring when the church is occupied. You don't need it all the time. It's only when people are in the facility, because that can help prevent it. Otherwise, they're just evidence. They don't stop anything. Good lighting, clear signage, properly functioning doors, and fire and intrusion alarms. Communications, radios. Radios should be discreet, although they're getting more and more pervasive in churches now, and it's less of an issue than it used to be. How do you do mass notifications if there's something that needs to get out? Some churches have flashing red on the screens, on the display screens up in front, and if they're flashing red, everybody's supposed to get down. That's one of the things that can happen. Access control systems and emergency lighting, all of that counts. Watch for behavioral threat detection. This is something you train your ushers to do and all of your team members, is look for these signaling things. Fixation, inappropriate dress, attendance, avoidance of greeters, those kinds of things. So the all-risk approach says that it's not just about active shooters. It's just not just medical emergencies. It's not just weather. We are trying to address all the risks the church can face. These are some of those things that you can see. Why it works? If you've got a team of people trained to do multiple things, you're not saying, okay, for a medical incident, we're going to use these people. For this, we're going to... Number one, you train fewer people. And number two, there's cross-training in this thing where each different people may take the lead, but all of your people are trained in AED and advanced first aid to stop the bleed. If you have a mass casualty event, that's important because now you've got multiple people that can go out now to start helping dealing with the injured. It builds confidence in the team. You get a more consistent response, and it avoids the active shooter tunnel vision where the only thing we're preparing for is the guy that comes through the door with a gun. That gets you into a trap. So we want to detect early, communicate clearly, stabilize the situation, protect people, call the appropriate help, document, review, and reissue. It's good to do a after incident every time you have one, whether it's a major one or a minor one. Sit everybody down and say what worked. Now, you thought I was going to pass over this, didn't you? It's an asset and a liability at the same time if you have armed security. There are legal requirements that vary. It's a very complex issue. It's not simply give somebody a gun, have them sit by the door. I'm a gun guy. I'll admit it. I've been shooting since I was 16. I've competed at the national level in multiple disciplines. I've been shooting my entire life. At our peak, my wife and I were shooting over 25,000 rounds a year in preparation for competitions. I'm a gun guy. I still don't know enough about guns. And for me to take a 45-foot shot on a moving target takes about every ounce of skill I got, because I practice it occasionally. For somebody that hasn't had any training, they're going to shoot somebody that's in between them and the shooter. That's the liability that you're taking. So liability is significant. The training standards in each state are different. Some churches allow, there are 2 states that don't allow guns in churches, except that have specific rules for guns in churches. Louisiana, under no circumstances, any place are you allowed to bring a gun into church. Licensed carry or not, can't do it. Nebraska, you can only bring them in if the church gives you specific permission to bring them in. Everything else is pretty much, if you are licensed to carry, there are no prohibitions against carrying in church. Church culture and theology do matter. LDS Church has said, we don't care what anybody does, what anybody says, you will not bring guns into LDS churches. You will not defend yourself in an LDS church. They may rethink that based on the last 2 months. They've had 2 serious incidents. Firearms introduce risk as well as protection. The best trained people that I know of to deal with what we are talking about are the air marshals. They have the highest competency standard anywhere to be armed, and they have to pass a qualification before they fly. Every time they fly, or they're not allowed to go. And they are working in an environment where there may be 1 or 2 threats and up to 300 or 400 non-threats. That's what we're talking about in the church. You better have confidence that the people that are carrying a gun in your church are capable of dealing with that kind of a situation. And you don't get that by shooting once a year. That doesn't happen. It's a perishable skill. I don't care how much training you have if you don't shoot. If I don't shoot for a week, I can tell. If I don't shoot for 2 weeks, my wife can tell. If I don't shoot for 3 weeks, everybody can tell. It's that much of a perishable skill. Firearms induce risk, and it may impact your insurance coverage. I can't answer that. I just know that in where we are, we have 2 insurance companies that will issue an insurance policy if you have armed security, but they have to be trained, and you have to have a copy of your your whole security plan on file with them before they will issue the policy. They want to review it and make sure you've covered all the bases. So are armed volunteers legal? In Texas, if you do not wear any uniform, anything that identifies you as security, if you only do security on the church property, and if you are a non-paid volunteer, you do not need a license. The minute any one of those 3 conditions change, you are required by law to have a license or you're in violation of law. I can't speak for other states. I don't know. Our license, in some cases, the state laws will require that anybody doing that kind of work will be a licensed security officer. I know there are a couple of states that have those written in. What kind of training standards will we require? I always get poo-pooed when I say, hey, the air marshal ought to be a good starting place. Well, it's too tough to pass. Duh. Still ought to be a standard. If you can't do that, why would you be shooting? Why would I be shooting a guy standing back in that corner if I was hitting you guys? And it's happened. All of the church security team in our church carry exactly the same ammunition. We buy it every year. We issue it to each security team member, and they carry it for that year. And then the next year, we go shoot that in practice and buy another case. Why do we do that? Rotation ammunition is one. What's the obvious one?
You can interchange from somebody else.
You can interchange ammunition. If somebody in that church who is not a threat gets shot, can I exclude the member of our security team pretty quickly? If it's not one of our bullets, and he doesn't have our ammunition in his gun, then it wasn't one of my people that shot him. That's expensive. Yeah, it is. How will we vet candidates? Boy, is that a big deal. I spent 20 years in the military. Am I qualified to be a security team member?
Don't know.
Good answer. Am I qualified?
Don't know.
I like that. I like it. How do you coordinate with law enforcement? It would really be bad if somebody comes into your church, your security team takes him out, and they haven't practiced how to do this with police and the cops shoot them. That would be a bad day. How do we communicate to the congregation? That's important. You've got this slide. This is what I would put down as minimum standards. Armed but untrained, I think we've already beat that to death pretty well. Integrating armed and unarmed roles, that information, and again, it's using all of the resources you have available. Here's the answer. Firearm is not a safety plan. It's part of a larger safety system. Well, a couple of key thoughts to wrap it up. Safety is a ministry. Prevention beats response. All risk protects more people. Layered security is more effective. Armed security requires high standards. I stand by all of those. Next, take the handout, do a risk assessment. If you've got a plan now, don't start over, just go through it and make sure you've addressed everything. If you don't have a team, form a team. Develop written policies and procedures. Train your volunteers, build relationships with law enforcement, and review and improve continuously. Safe church, strong, fearless church. Questions? Answers? Yes, sir.
Not so much a question. We just went through the safety assessment with our local sheriff department, and they came up with a lot of things, that we could do. One of the ones that amazed me, and this is on the theft issue, is air conditioning units.
Oh.
He said the
Yeah.
amount of theft on the air conditioning units, the amount of
Copper's
copper.
a big deal.
I mean, he said they're having more problems with that, and a camera on them,
Cajun,
protect them.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just,
Give
I
your
hadn't
local
even
welder
thought
some work.
about that as being, we thought of all of our audio-visual stuff, all the stuff in the church. But that was something that really surprised me.
We've had like 7 or 8 churches in this town hit for copper
Oh,
AC units in the past
it's all
like 2
over.
months. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Note to self, better time management.